Before I get into starting us on science, I want to explain a little bit about my background and why I'm here talking to us today. I went to school at Pepperdine and majored in communication, but I wanted to study psychological communication. We've heard a lot of people talking about psychology and those types of details today, and it really frustrated me when I was in school to learn that that wasn't a thing. I wanted to major in psychological communication and I was existentially broken when I discovered that that wasn't a thing. That we don't learn how to communicate and how to engage people based on the science of engagement. After I was at Pepperdine, I went to Boeing and I worked in the space division where they make the space shuttle main engines, and the International Space Station was still on the ground back in those days. It was incredible working in corporate communication and in the sciences, and I knew that science and technology was the field that I wanted to spend my career in, but I was more oriented for agency life, thinking about all different types of clients and services. Back in the 90s, when tech was still a super specialty, none of the big firms did tech. So there was a firm called Alexander Communication, and Ogilvy bought them, and I and some of the different teams around the country were called Alexander Ogilvy, and we were the ones who did tech infrastructure. We were the people who did tech work and telecom. Anybody recognize this little paperclip on the screen? This was Clippy in Microsoft Word and Microsoft products back in the olden days. Clippy was a little conversational box that would dance around and talk to you. Clippy was my first client when I was at Ogilvy. Fun AI fact, if you're using Copilot and Nico, their voice assistant, if you click it a whole bunch of times, it turns into Clippy. Clippy Easter egg. So after my time at these two, I then started my own firm, Volume Public Relations. Over the years, we also launched the sister agencies, Engagement Science Lab and Affect Institute, taking all that science that we've been studying all these years since being at Pepperdine and making it, understanding more of how science really does influence what we do and how to make science part of communication and strategy. And now full circle, we're now starting to teach courses at Pepperdine and do a whole bunch of this different science elements that I'm talking to you about coming more into form. Let's pause on everything AI for a minute. And I want you to think about kind of a meta concept with me. I know we've heard this saying, but I want you to sit with me for a minute in the fact that what we perceive creates our reality. Not necessarily really reality, just whatever we perceive is reality, that is our reality. And for our audiences, I want you to try to hold both of these audiences, both in place as I talk to you for the next few minutes here about the experiences of what I'm saying relative to you and our audiences. Whatever we think is truth, we integrate as our worldview and how we see everything around us. I think it's helpful to think instead of there being this big world of reality, it's more like we all live in these little snow globes of reality, right? Of what I see and I think and I believe or I've been exposed to, right? Like a cancer surgeon knows so much more and has a very different worldview than I do by nature of all the things that they know, because I'm not trained in that field, right? But we also form worldviews and niche ourselves into more isolated communities as well if our worldviews become different from one another. And we're talking about this because now that we're in the age of AI, we tend to believe what we see. We and our audiences are starting to trust AI more and more and create these isolated individual worldviews. All right, so perception is reality. Here's a great example. Let's make it simple, okay? There's this grandpa in Florida, this is a true story, who doesn't want people speeding past his house. So instead of going to city council, he put up a sign. He wears a yellow vest with a blow dryer, and everyone perceives that it's a speed trap. So now they've all reported it on Waze and Google Maps, and it's saved as a speed trap, and nobody speeds past it. You see this logo in the crayon version. Is that not obviously or immediately you believe it to be something for children? Right? Now, I just made this version of this logo. This is a tech company. We could just swap it to that, and our subconscious minds decided that's what that means. There's somewhere in your worldview formation that said if it's drawn in crayon with a little rainbow and a sun, it's for children. Right? That doesn't mean that that's really what that is. It's your worldview. And then how we all have these worldviews, how we just synthesize meaning around things. Let's think about science, how much it changes our worldview. Because AI is about to rocket launch us into an age of new scientific understanding. We need to get ready to let our worldviews grow and change. Now, I want to put us in history for that. Does anybody watch Bridgerton or period TV shows? Can you imagine what the science and the medicine was like back in those days? They seem romantic, but I wouldn't want to get sick back then. Back then, they thought your blood was poisonous and that it was making you sick. So they would put leeches on you or cut you and drain your blood, which just made you weaker and you died. It takes society a long time to learn things that are real and then change. Now, when science was evolving, it's important for us to think about what are the things that we didn't know then and we still don't know today that we're going to look back in horror in the future and say, how could you have lived that way today? Has anybody heard the history of hand washing? I think it really parallels well to our industry because we are handling the communication which shapes people. In the history of hand washing, the doctor who discovered, way before germ theory was discovered, that hands were making people sick. It turned out that doctors at this certain hospital in 1840, they were working in the morgue in the morning and then delivering babies in the afternoon. And all these women and babies were dying. They wanted to try to figure out what was happening. And this doctor eventually comes to discover it's what's on their hands. They institute hand washing, and the deaths plummet, and then they exile the doctor from the hospital. Because germ theory hadn't been discovered yet. So even though we knew something in science and we could see it and say, this is what's happening, we need to do right by these people, they didn't make that choice. Because the doctors didn't really want to believe that their hands were what was making people sick. Okay, now horrifying fun fact. We didn't mandate hand washing all the way across American hospitals until 1980. Whoa. It takes a long time for the whole scientific body to catch up and for things to become norm. I want us to be the doctors that realize that we have germs on our hands and that we wash our hands. Right? And what are they going to say about us in the future about that? This concept is intellectual humility. If you haven't read on this, there's a lot online and interesting things to read, but the concept that we are specialists, we do know deep entrenched things, but we need to stay very flexible in that knowledge because it's going to keep changing. The sciences are changing so fast. Technology is changing, what our jobs are, how we write a press release. I know you might not like what's coming. I'm going to show you how we write press releases now. These things change and we need to stay intellectually humble and flexible to adapt to those changes. I put this slide in here because when we all went to school, most of us went to school to get some type of communication degree, right? We don't tend to think of communication as a science. Usually we're in some type of social degree and just took, I had OrCom as my degree program, right? But really, everything you see on here, these are all of the sciences that influence what's going on when we're communicating. So if you want to do your best job as a communicator, you need to be thinking through research and science from all of these places that influence what comes together and what happens. We only have 30 minutes today, so we're going to sum it up with a new phrase you can note, which is called taking a transdisciplinary view of communication. I look across all scientific disciplines, and I incorporate all what they teach me. And from this transdisciplinary view, what do I find? You've heard a few other people say this today, so I'm not the one giving away the big surprise ending, is that communication is an art, but it is also a science. Measurable in how it intervenes with our biology, our cognition, and our behavior in predictable, lawful, and unlawful ways. Another fun word to sum this up is communicology. Like we have psychology, right? There's communicology, the science of this communication. And we know we are influencing people predictably. And when I say lawful and unlawful, it's because our laws are starting to change because of this new science of understanding of how I am influencing you when we engage. Now let's think about it for a second. When I say I'm engaging people, when I say we're communicating with people, what really are we doing? Because I think a lot of times we tend to think about it from the perspective simply of, I am dropping a packet of information in front of you, I'm writing up all this data, and I'm just dropping it. And it's your information to take, and that's all that's really happening when I communicate. But it isn't. We have a more powerful role with people when we're communicating. What we're doing is changing their mind and their emotions and their bodies. Right? We're creating changes in states of awareness and consideration. We're making people laugh, happy, sad, get the chills. Right? Communication creates physiological change. Anybody familiar with AMEC, the International Association for Communication Measurement Standards? PRSA is our partner of AMEC too. They have set what are called the Barcelona principles as the ways that we measure communication work as being successful or not. And if you look at all the Barcelona principles, they net down into explaining basically we're looking at three things that we measure in terms of how successful are our jobs. And that is, are we changing perceptions? How well are we changing attitudes? And how well did we change behaviors? Nearly every one of the principles. So it serves us to get clear that I'm not just influencing people. I'm not just dropping knowledge and information and piecing out, I did my job. No, your job is to change people's perceptions, attitudes, and behavior. And it's good that we are sober about that and really take that responsibility seriously in understanding that we have that alchemist role. And so what do we do with that? Now, a lot of people tend to say, no, I'm not changing people because change is really hard, right? Change is this difficult thing. And that's a lie, a total fallacy. Change is the natural ordered state. Did anybody try to get the wrinkle on your face? Right? They happen. Change is natural. We just tend to only think about change in the extremes, like stopping smoking. But that's another fallacy. Don't fall in that trap. We're changing all day, every day, in the way that we influence people. And we also don't hate change. Is anybody get mad if you get upgraded to first class? Right? We don't like change that we perceive as reductive or taking away from ourselves. But actually, we love positive change. Now here's the big fun scientific term for it. Take a picture of this one if you don't know Dr. Gabor Mate. Binge his content. He's a medical doctor. His mother survived Auschwitz. After a career as a medical doctor, he also became a psychologist. My kids made me put this hyphenation in here and we have to all say it together. His big new word for us to really understand here is psychoneuroimmunology. All right, so we're all going to say psychoneuroimmunology. There's our psychology, our behavior, and everything going on in our brain, and how that affects our immune system. It's shaping our health. We can't separate those two aspects. All of us know we have an individual immune system, but I think about the fact that there are also scaled immune systems. We have one in this room. You have one in your organization. How well can you collaborate and bounce back when there's issues? How trustworthy of an environment is it? We also have our social immune system. Some would say it's showing signs of dis-ease right now. It serves us to understand that when we're influencing someone, when we are changing people with communication, we are shaping this immune system across different scales. The neuroscientist at USC explains this as we are not thinking machines that feel, but feeling machines that think. This is from a neuroscientist who studies the brain, and we really used to think everything in our world is based on that we are thinking machines. That's why you're supposed to design a cognitive smart information to convince the rational brain of your audience is what they're supposed to do. But as we've heard from our other speakers, we need to instead respond with emotional vulnerability and emotional intelligence and bringing other factors to play, because the whole world is starting to understand rationality isn't what we're really all about. And now here's the crazy part. The crazy part too is that we used to live in this whole paradigm that man is rational, right? So the last 50 years, all of the behavioral science research, does anybody read like books on like nudge or any of all these behavioral science discoveries? That whole world of research had to be organized as being about proof that you're irrational and you're broken. Because at the time, when it was all being discovered, the world believed we were rational. And that's the way framing works in science research. If the yardstick is rationality and you find something to prove it isn't the case, you have to call it irrationality. But now we can drone above all of it and say rationality was never right to begin with. So the last 50 years of scientific research framing this all as proof of our irrationality isn't right either. It turns out actually what they've been studying these 50 years is called a system of affect. We really are participating in this affectivism paradigm and process. Now let me make this way simpler. Has anybody seen this movie, Inside Out? It's an amazing Disney movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend. There's two versions, and they did a lot of things right in the way they imagine this. But they imagine that these characters live inside your head. These are all our different emotions. The one in the middle, that's joy. And they're all standing over this dashboard that has buttons and dials and levers, and that they animate the human based on how they push and handle those buttons. And this is a huge takeaway I hope you take from me right now, is that when you're communicating, you are standing in front of a sophisticated control panel of human behavior, and what you're really doing is dialing in behavioral affects and how they impact your audience, and ultimately the overall system's health. We just don't know that we're doing that. We haven't been shown that that's what we're doing when we're engaging and what the names and the labels are. So because we don't have that organized system, when somebody in the sciences and then the marketing industry finds that one of these buttons works really well, they tell us to push the ever-loving daylights out of it. With things like fear, scarcity, and urgency, these big red button things that only work because they put you in a state of dis-ease. Our marketing media and everything, they tell us to push them like crazy, and we get awards for pushing them. And really, we're doing things that are like doctors not washing their hands and harming people, and we're celebrating it because we don't understand that we're only successful because we got a reaction instead of a relationship. I'm grateful I've heard that from some of our other speakers today, that we are in the business of public relationships, not public reactions. And rage bait and so much of the psychologically optimized or behaviorally empowered recommendations today are prioritizing reaction, significantly reaction over relationship. When you do that, you may measure short-term organizational gains, but that's not creating a relationship in the long-term measured benefit. I could go on this all day, but a quick example of what this looks like in language, opt-in and opt-out forms. And when you can word it by saying like, yes, the yes is yes, I want to be successful. And the no is like, no, I'm a jerk, I don't want to grow. I want to stay stuck forever, right? There's an example of the kind of language that's actually putting that audience in dis-ease. This is technically a psychological violation of no. You're making people accept and wear a negative identity statement in order to leave. I have to put this on and say, yep, I'm not good, in order to move through the page. 2026. I can think of so many things that are on the news right now that behaviorally were totally okay to do 20 years ago. And if you do them now, you're canceled, you're in jail, right? There's a huge wave of that coming for us in our language. Because we're now starting to understand that there is communication and engagement that creates coherence. It's what we consider more legitimate influence. And then there's communication influence that is exploitative. that is manipulative in its reason for being successful. It's only triggering you, it's collapsing critical thinking, it's compressing your ability to think. If you're running a series of content and engagement funnels that are every day showing people that there's only 5 minutes before this offer expires, and it's just a machine of every 5 minutes, that's compressing people's ability to process. It's rushing them into a decision. And it's allowed right now, but it won't be for too long. Now, Ken talked to us about emotional intelligence. What I'm talking to you about here is called affective intelligence. Understanding that let's think of it organizationally, my brand has an affect that is shaping the effects in other people. By Substack, I have more on it here. If you want to read more, we're publishing a lot there. And this age that we are in right now is what could be called the age of indiscriminate influence. We don't know what the dashboard buttons are, so we push them all over the place. And there's been a number of lawsuits recently where the communication professionals, the CCOs, who approved some of this communication language and some of the design of their systems to be manipulative have been found personally liable. Not just the company. I get that if I do this, you psychologically are going to be confused. I know if I make the button colors, if I put in a highlighted color, the one that you think you want, like you're doing a cancellation process, and all the way after all these hundreds of steps in cancellation, you get to the end, and cancel should be the one in bright orange instead of the one shaded out. And if the last second you make the one shaded out instead, never mind, I changed my mind. So people click that as the orange instead and then have to start an hour-long cancellation process over again. That's part of what Amazon did relative to Prime and are criminally liable for the effects on their audience. So that's the science side, right? Now that we're in this world of AI, the effects of all of that are being multiplied and changing what we're doing here across our PR world. I want you to think about PR and the fact that we have essentially gone through 3 different eras. Someone earlier talked to us about PR 1.0, like our Ed Bernays type of days, right, of PR. 2.0 is when we moved into the social media age, and it serves us to think now that we are in an entirely new era of PR. PR 3.0, or this data or assisted, I like to call it assisted intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. But what were things like in PR 1.0? What's really important for us to focus on most of all is that the people who decided what shaped worldview were media and journalists. There was a very big wall of gatekeeping in between information and the people being shaped. In 2.0, we moved into that reputation era, where we now have to shape algorithms, and we're dealing with platforms, and we're dealing with community moderation, and all of these different factors that are happening. For the first time now, communication is more two-way and conversational, and all of these different digital and social platforms. And now in 3.0, we have a new layer, a new filter that lives in between us and our audiences, this new intelligence layer that mediates and helps make sense of the world. And instead of gatekeeping of media deciding who's going to influence people, or instead of the community type influence we had with one another in social and in PR 2.0, now we have machines that synthesize together everything and then tell you very confidently, as our first speaker said, they are confidently wrong, right? They can be absolutely mistaken, but present it to you as absolute confident fact. And a significant number of our audience accepts it that way. So now it's not just our job to talk to the media and to talk to people. We now also have to shape what AI says. And if we aren't watching it and stepping in to shape that, then we are missing a huge part of what is happening in this world today and how people are making decisions and not paying attention to what matters. Now, why are people making this decision? This is a helpful way to think about it for my comms majors, is that this is the first technology in the world ever, history of life, that communicates interpersonally. The way I'm talking to you, this human-to-human voice, we just walked over the threshold of technology being able to do that for the first time in history. And it turns out we trust interpersonal language like this much more. Even though it's from a machine, we can't seem to get over that it really is just a machine, and so they receive it as a person. You gave us an example from your mom. Do your parents understand what you do for a living? My mom does not get what I do for a living, but she runs an Etsy shop. Okay? She runs an Etsy shop. She's got quite a little hopping business over there, and she's frustrated about certain things that aren't working well, and I keep trying to tell her what she needs to do. And she's like, you don't know about marketing. No, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. Okay? Well, a few weeks ago, she told her AI, she's very enamored and has a personal relationship with Chat, and she told Chat that she's my mom. And her chat went wild. It's like, your daughter is Elizabeth Edwards, Affective intelligence? Oh my gosh, she's famous. Making my mom feel like a queen. And it's like, good job, Mom. You did such a great job. You should be so proud. So she is, of course. But now, Chat is reasoning with her as if it's me. It's telling her, here's what Elizabeth would tell you should do for your shop. And some of it's right, but some of it's absolutely not. And I swear to you, my own mother will sit at a table and be like, well, this is what Chat says you would say. I'm not saying, but it's not what I'm going to say. She's like, oh, you just don't know. You just don't understand. Right? It knows the whole of me. I've talked to it so much more. And the way it talks to me, it knows. And my own mother believes what AI says I will say more than what I actually say. That's what Affective is, and that graduates across the scale of everyone that we engage. So we need to start thinking about it. You've heard this word so much, it's so consistent. You can trust this, is that you are now signal shapers. And all of these signals that we create, they are shaping what AI is saying, whether you put it out or not. So we have to start thinking about, I am the one that is training what the system says and what people fully believe. Let me give you a quick case study on a law firm client of ours. A law firm client who had been doing all SEO work before not really working with the PR firms. They didn't have media coverage. It's owned by a woman, and when we stress test it to find out in AI what it's going to say negatively, it says that this is a father's rights firm and that I as a woman shouldn't hire them. Because the only signal they've been putting out are things optimized for SEO purposes, and the SEO people have been on this father's rights campaign and putting out blog posts and content about it. So when I said I'm looking for a divorce attorney, I said, oh, don't hire them because they're a father's rights firm. So many interesting things happening about what we now need to look at what AI is saying and shape that. The good news is, good and bad, is that we can reshape what AI says within days. We have a client in the sciences who had done a significant amount of research to prove that 3 out of 4 people felt good about a particular scientific innovation. And then an organization put out a baseless press release, nothing cited in it, that 3 out of 4 people felt the opposite way. And so AI changed and said 3 out of 4 people don't like this. So we instead put out content architected with all the types of signal points. So it reads more like a white paper and it has tables and charts and data and links back to an evidence hub. There's this whole process. You're getting it amplified into trades. That's a really big part of it. And within 3 days, AI went back to saying 3 out of 4 people feel positive about this scientific innovation. Even though the research was from last year, right? The timing of it didn't change. It's about how, talk about feeling powerful, guys. This is how we change literally what AI says, but it's also kind of low-key terrifying that AI is that permeable. We know people are not coming to our sites much anymore, and I'm just outlining for you what really specifically changes. Everything changes across every function of what we do. We aren't just writing press releases for humans, we have to write them differently. Not a scary different way, but a clear formula that is for us to follow. Certain wires that we can send them over so they get read and ingested into the systems. Other wires that don't work. Now when we're writing our content, we have to think about that unintended AI signal interpretation. Who else is creating content in your ecosystem that maybe is messing with the way that the AI signal is being shaped? I querying with adversarial questions, find the AI blind spots. Speak as a person, people ask messy questions. They don't just say, tell me who is the best for blah, blah, blah. They tell me what are the scandals, what are the negatives, why should I not work with? We need to be stress testing what AI is saying, realizing that we are responsible for shaping those responses and being aware of that narrative world as much as the positive narrative world. And really this continual signal governance, this is a very big important part of our job. Just like in the last couple decades, we had to take on community management and social reputation and that entire world. Now we have this entire world of signal governance, this entire new way of shaping trust. So how do we do signal architecture? There's specific ways that we develop our websites, our releases, and the way that we structure the content on our own channels. We also have to rethink crisis communication. We have to have real-time AI monitoring. We have to have a plan for how we are addressing signal correction in real time. What happens when it's not just 3 out of 4 people don't like this, but it's a complete fact shift? That happens. How are you watching it, and what do you do immediately to shift it? Because your immediate action can shift it very fast. And then instead of people being scared, you're the wizard in the room that is the most valuable person because you really understand how to shape AI. And another point we all need to think about is narrative cleanup. We never had to do this before. After an event, like let's say you're in crisis management and saying, everybody go over here for safety's sake, right? Once that's done, you have to restate now what the state of things are so that the narrative stays accurate. You can't just post on Facebook. You have to create a piece of signal that corrects narrative and shapes narrative all the way along. And on that crisis side, we have to be prepared for deepfakes. There are certain technologies and tools we can use so that when a deepfake is published, we pull out of our crisis protocol exactly how to prove it is a deepfake before it can go anywhere and really get that traction. So our new commitments in this age of 3.0, think as that signal architect, as well as carrying forward our ethical leadership, how we affectively are engaging people and playing that little dashboard of human behavior. So if you want that or a copy of today's presentation, please scan this QR code and I would love to give you all of that. Thank you very much.